This is actually a really useful way of thinking about how intuition is a complement to knowledge that somebody already has. That intuition is something that you cultivate. You develop your intuition in a particular field by not just waiting on your intuition and for something to come to you, but also having the kind of disciplined work to keep showing up and learning about the space so that your intuitive decision making can come like that. Welcome back, everyone. It is your host, Iman, and today I'm feeling particularly grounded in the fact that I have reached an age where I know what is going to keep me up at night. And where is this coming from? 2 days ago, I was on the train. I was coming home. It's getting around rush hour time, not quite rush hour time. I get on the train and there's an older Black woman, probably like 60, 65. Somebody's granny, somebody's Mima. And if you know anything about the New York subways, where the bar splits the bench, 3 people can sit. So she is sitting not directly in the middle, but a little to the side so that she's not the first seat. But all that to say is she wasn't sitting in what would be designated as seat 1 entirely because there was a used Band-Aid on the seat. Classic New York subway, gross stuff. A man comes in on the train, non-Black person of color, and he asks her to move to the seat with the used Band-Aid. And she's saying, no, I'm not going to move. Now, whether or not he saw that used Band-Aid there, I think he did see it. He just didn't care. He thought that she should move regardless. And so I have my headphones in. They have a very minimal back and forth. And I can tell she is telling him, no, like I'm not going to move. And then he proceeds to shove himself in the small space between like the little rail thing and basically sits on top of her and pushes her out of the way. She is obviously visibly upset. And of course she's visibly upset because this man has just assaulted her. This man is probably around my age. Again, this is like very clearly an elderly Black woman. And she's like, I can't believe you sat on me. I can't believe you sat on me. And they're exchanging words and they're going back and forth. No one on the train is saying anything. I am like, oh my God. And I turn to her. I don't turn to him because obviously this is clearly someone who will put their hands on women and will assault women. So I'm not trying to put myself in his line of fire, but nobody is saying anything. And what I'm sure as hell never going to do is be silent when I just witness somebody's granny get assaulted. Also, I'm the only other Black woman in the train cart that I can see or that I think had eyesight on the situation, what happened. And I turn to her and I say, ma'am, I am so sorry that happened to you. That was really messed up. That shouldn't have happened to you. And I'm sorry that this is happening and you're going through this right now. He's like, what are you talking about? Da-da-da. He's directing his anger at me, but I'm like, I'm not even talking to him. I'm not even looking at him. This woman has tears in her eyes. Obviously, she's upset. She's embarrassed. And she goes, and the worst part is nobody on this train is even trying to talk to this man. There's no man on this train that is trying to talk to him. Nobody's saying anything. No one has said anything to this man. No one has said anything in defense of her except for me. When I just told her, I just wanted to know and let her know that I had bared witness to an injustice that she had experienced, but nobody else on the train was willing to. And this is a very New York thing, right? I lived in New York for over 2 years, and I say that living in New York as a girl from the Midwest taught me how to mind my own damn business. But at the same time, you get to a certain age and you see certain things where there gets to a point where you can't just mind your own business. In order for you to be able to sleep at night, you have to be able to bear witness and let the other person know that you're bearing witness to their pain. And so I was telling somebody about this and she was like, oh my God, I hate that you said something, that you put yourself in that situation. And I was like, oh, I knew standing there that I would be able to sleep at night knowing, let's say that man did punch me in the face or assault me in the same way that he was clearly willing to assault that woman. I could sleep well at night. What I could not sleep well at is watching this 65-year-old, an elder with tears in her eyes because a man assaulted her and no one else was affirming that reality. No one else was witnessing that injustice alongside her. And I was talking to my girlfriend about this, and one of the reasons we are together is that we just feel the same way about this stuff. Like, at the end of the day, if I'm seeing something that's wrong, I'm I have to say something. That is because I grew up in a tradition that told me so. And what I mean by that is I grew up hearing this hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that said, whoever among you sees evil, let him change it with his hand. If he cannot do so, then with his tongue. And if he cannot do so, then within his heart, which is the weakest of the faith. When you witness an evil, when you witness an injustice, as a Muslim, as this hadith says, you have to bear witness to that injustice and know it's wrong. I obviously could not change that with my hands because I am not trying to inflict violence on myself. I'm a woman, all of these things, right? I'm a Black woman, I'm a young Black woman, what have you. But what I could do was I could change it with my tongue by telling her, ma'am, I see what happened to you, and I just want to affirm your reality that what happened to you was effed up, and you shouldn't have experienced it. And the least that you can do is change it with your heart and know that that was wrong and bear witness for yourself. With the way that I'm built, I just frequently feel compelled to say something. So I just bring that up because I think there's a lot of clarity in knowing when you will stand up for something. And once you do it once, I think you will frequently do it over and over again. I don't know what it is about public transportation as this particular site for me. I always say, it's so funny. My mom was telling me, like, don't walk in the park. It's the most dangerous thing to do. And I had to tell her that, one, that's not how gendered violence works. Gendered violence frequently happens with those that you know in an intimate settings. But then I had to tell her that actually, when it comes to public spaces, the most places I feel where I encounter the most violence or I feel the least safe is actually in public transportation settings. There is something about public transportation where you are just in contact in stressful situations with a lot of different people who have a lot of different moral compasses, and just don't be acting the way you know how you should act. Don't be acting in public in the way that you know you should act as well. And I just bring that up because I think there's a real grounding and a real clarity in knowing who are you when you witness an injustice. Who are you when you know in your heart of hearts that you just witnessed something that was wrong? Who are you in your heart and hearts when you know that somebody is experiencing a violence, a psychological violence, because they've just been through something and no one is bearing witness to the injustice that they experience? Who are you in that moment? Are you somebody who is going to stay silent? Are you somebody that is going to change it with your tongue? Are you somebody that is going to change it with your hands? Frequently, as a young Black woman, I frequently am left to change things with my tongue. And that is, to me, I always feel like that is where, my gendered and racialized identities and what have you, especially when it comes to injustices that I witness that are perpetrated by men, I have to change it with my tongue. I frequently cannot change it with my hand, even though changing with your hand doesn't mean throwing hands, right? It means like, what are you going to do structurally, systemically to change this, to change society, what have you. But I'm frequently in these moments where I feel like I need to speak up in a crowd and in a crowd of strangers. Speaking up in a crowd of strangers and also speaking up amongst your peers. I'm not going to say one is harder than the other, but they both take guts and they both take a lot of vulnerability because you are also risking your social standing, right? I am also risking being, verbally assaulted and attacked by this man, or physically in the same way that he did this woman, or I am risking my in-group status and my acceptance within a group. And so I just say that to say, once you know that about yourself, like I frequently am someone, I know no one is going to say something that I think is an injustice in front of me and is a blatant one. Blatant, no nuance about it. You know what I mean? I was just in the nail salon the other day and this patron and the nail salon owners were talking about how Black people do not have enough collective sense, collective strength, collective discipline across history and across time to implement any real change. They said that everything that happened in Black power was actually a result of white people. And they referred to the 3 Black women who founded Black Lives Matter as not actually having found the movement. They referred to George Floyd as that George guy. So again, I'm witnessing this conversation happen amongst non-Black people of color, and I ended up having to say something. I got into it with the salon owners, all of these things. New York is one of those places, right? People are talking, they've got opinions, but if you have your opinion in public and it is a wrong one and it is a violent one, and I happen to be in the space where I am going to bear witness to it, you're going to hear my mouth about it. It's going to be polite, it's going to be educated, it's always going to be instructive. That is one thing I try to do. Or it's always going to be empathetic, as in, sis, I bear witness to the fact that you just experienced something crazy. But again, the point being that the sooner that you can understand who you are and how you act in public when you have witnessed an injustice and when you are forced to witness an injustice, I think there's a lot of grounding in that. There's a certain kind of expertise in that, expertise in your own knowledge of yourself and who you are, but also expertise in being able to point out injustices when they happen in everyday life. I think if there's one thing that studying Black thought, religious studies, Black history, when you're thinking at a real systemic level, and that doesn't exclusively come through academia and what have you, but there's something about studying injustice, right? And studying the way that injustice and all these big systems, all these isms trickle down to the everyday, where you become extremely aware of the everyday acts that make up those systems, right? The systems aren't just built on high level players, they're built on these everyday actions that we ignore. And so when you study injustice, you have a certain kind of expertise in it where you're able to pinpoint exactly why that man shoving that Black woman out of her seat and nobody saying anything was a grave injustice. And so that is a certain kind of expertise that I think also brings clarity in who you're going to be when you witness an injustice. And that is a segue to actually our grounding question of the day, which is intuition a sign of expertise? And I bring this up because, as I mentioned last week, I finished that article that I was telling you guys about on the Black nationalist organization, the Republic of New Africa. And now I'm 10 toes down in intuition because I'm writing this book chapter on intuition for this edited volume that is going to be coming out on modern spirituality, aka metaphysical religion, but just modern spirituality is something that I feel like is more familiar with people. And a part of that is I'm writing a chapter on intuition, both on how it is talked about on the ground for the people and the thinkers that I think with, and then also how it is talked about in academia in areas of expertise. And today I want to talk about this idea of intuition as expertise. And last week we talked about how a particular field of study that has a really sustained conversation around intuition is philosophy. And we dealt with a philosophy article last week. And as I mentioned, right, I'm in a stage of gathering information about how other fields talk about intuition. And I would say that the second field of study that has a really in-depth and robust conversation around intuition is actually management studies. And so I read this article by Victor Dorfler and Fran Ackerman, and the article is entitled Understanding Intuition, the Case for Two Forms of Intuition. Now, just to summarize what the intervention of this article is, because I think it's a really important one, and then I'm going to land on this idea that I think is actually really helpful at its base, is this idea of intuition as an offshoot of expertise. And then I'm going to go into what I also think is a limitation of that when we don't account for spirituality and the unseen when folks talk about intuition, which is my field when we get into the religious studies bit. But let's take it back to management studies and let's take it back to the intervention by Ackerman and Dorfler of what this article is about. So in this article, they're making the case for understanding intuition in a way that their field, that of management studies, has not understood. Management studies being like the study of business, the study of corporations and C-suite people making decisions and all of that stuff. That is a whole area of study. So what they are saying is that intuition, up until this point, when they are writing this article in their field of management studies, leadership studies, has been primarily understood as judgment. Intuition has equal judgment, meaning that scholars, researchers have been interested in understanding intuition as it relates to people in the corporate sphere, people in business, making intuitive decisions about their day-to-day jobs and what have you. And this is them understanding intuition as an evaluative decision-making process. That intuition only comes into play when people who are in the corporate sphere need to make certain kinds of business decisions, and they're making them on the fly, and they're not necessarily following the business case study model. They're not necessarily following best practices of what the field says. They're just making intuitive decision making that they can't pinpoint to a particular kind of business model or what have you. So that is intuitive decision making as management learning understands it. And I think that's a way that a lot of people think about intuition. Not necessarily the people that I think with, because the people that I think with are talking about intuition on a very spiritual level. But when you go into pop psychology, when you hear the word intuition in the New York Times and the Atlantic and any kind of popular media, it's frequently talking about intuitive decision making. And also you can see this on TikTok. The intuition and manifestation girlies are always talking about intuition as it relates to generating capital. So this is very on par with this idea of intuition as being a part of management leadership, business models, what have you, right? Their intervention is basically saying, actually, this is only one form of intuition. What they want to add to the table is that intuition also happens at a spontaneous creative level. They are interested in intuition as the spontaneous emergence of novum or new knowledge and creativity. They call it intuition as insight, intuitive insight, if you want to just say it for short. So that is what they do. They actually go outside of management learning and management studies, and they are studying the way that intuition has been talked about outside of business and amongst scientists and amongst artists in their practices, and saying that intuition doesn't just come to inform decision-making processes. Intuition also manifests in this idea, Einstein even thought of it, these eureka moments, right? In the article, they have this example of a physicist who all of a sudden had left one day and had left his long, hard project, and he would come back from a walk or doing something unrelated to his work, and then bam, the right kind of law of science hit him, and he was able to name this very first principle. And again, it's like I'm glazing over the details because I'm like, okay, I'm not like super interested in this particular scientist, but you get the point of what I'm saying, is they're trying to conceptualize intuition as a moment of creative insight, as a moment of new knowledge for people who are already experts in their particular field. But for me, as a scholar of intuition, not in management learning, but as someone who is interested in the way that intuition is talked about amongst Black thinkers, amongst folks who are interested in the categories of religion and spirituality as they pertain to everyday life, is they're interested in intuition as it relates to expertise. And so they're very narrow in whose intuition they're interested in. In this article, they make very clear that they're not just interested in anyone's intuition. They're interested in the intuition of people who are already subject matter experts in this, right? They're interested in the intuition of the CEO. They're interested in the intuition of the Nobel laureate. They're interested in the intuition of renowned scientists and genius, of scholars, of scientists, of artists. They are interested in the creative, new knowledge, intuitive insights of people who are already 10 toes down in their field. This is a very common academic move. You always narrow who and what you're talking to as narrowly as you can, because that's how you make a real intervention. And there's just so much out there that in order for you not to make big claims that are so generalizable, you have to really pick your own definitions for things. And so the thing that they pick is they say, hey, we are actually interested in intuition as it relates to expert knowledge, because they say that this is the most trustworthy area of intuition when it comes to management leadership. So they cite literature and case studies that show that intuition is best and is most beneficial and works the best way, again, in this decision-making framework, when people use intuition in areas that they already have expertise in. They're saying the literature tells us that, everybody can use intuitive decision-making, but those decisions are not good decisions, accurate decisions, in whatever way they're assessing good and accurate, but those decisions don't necessarily prove fruitful if the person making the decision doesn't already have expertise in it. And so they do this because they're in management learning, right? They're in the study of business management. So they're interested in looking at intuition as a professional asset. And they're interested in looking at intuition as a reflection of tacit knowledge. So what is tacit knowledge? Tacit knowledge is that expertise that you have that you can't necessarily put into words. So, right, everyone can follow a recipe, but not everybody has what people call that certain je ne sais quoi in being able to really put their foot in it. As a matter of fact, everyone can follow a recipe, but not everybody can put their foot in it. and then being able to put your foot in it, that's tacit knowledge, right? So they're thinking about intuition as tacit knowledge, right? The person who puts their foot in it, that's not somebody that's trying that recipe for the first time. That's somebody that cooks. That's someone that's up in the kitchen all the time, right? So that is tacit knowledge, right? So they're saying that the intuitive cook, the girl who can put her foot in it, the auntie with the auntie arm, who can cook well, she has tacit knowledge, and not because it comes out of nowhere, but because she be in the kitchen and she's got knowledge. It's the same way in terms of like management leadership and intuitive. That's what they're talking about. Like intuitive tacit knowledge comes from people who have already expertise and knowledge in this field. So there you go. And now stepping back, I found this really interesting as somebody in religious studies and in Black studies, because I thought, wow, thinking about intuition exclusively or limited to people who have expertise in that field, I have to be honest, my first reaction was, I don't know, that sounds a little exclusionary, That sounds like you want to put up barriers to who can have good intuitive decision making. But then, then my second thought after that first initial thought was like, wait, that is actually so useful. I thought like, okay, this is actually a really useful way of thinking about how intuition is a complement to knowledge that somebody already has. That intuition is something that you cultivate. You develop your intuition in a particular field by not just waiting on your intuition and for something to come to you, but also having the kind of disciplined work to keep showing up and learning about the space so that your intuitive decision making can come like that. And they're very clear in this article. They say that they are, yes, talking about intuition and an understanding of intuition as experiential knowledge that you have that in the moment you might not be able to name or trace back to, but on second thought you can. So for example, I might say something is telling me to turn right here to go to the store because I'm not using my Google Maps or something like that. But actually, it turns out I actually went to this store 4 years ago when I stayed with a friend, and I just have a sense. So all that to say is that intuition is coming from a particular kind of experiential knowledge. And they're very clear that they are not talking about intuition as just another form of experiential knowledge. They are truly trying to name these kind of creative insights that come from knowledge in the field, but that are also new knowledge that you can't just tie back to experience. And I love this idea of thinking about intuition when we think about, for example, artists having intuition. It's not just, oh, I'm just going to do this and then I'm going to do this and then I'm going to do this. No, you have a certain way of the way that the light is hitting this moment, the way that you need to move the brushstroke. You have a certain way that, oh, well, I heard this once. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm going to try this new method. I'm going to try this new way. But it doesn't come out of nowhere, right? You've put in the work, you've put in the labor, and now your intuition is moving you in this space, but you already have a base of it. And I just thought about this and I thought, wow, it requires observation and it requires discipline as a predicate to one's intuition being good in an area. And so I think about that for myself. For example, like how can I let intuition guide my art research in a particular area? So again, I study Black nationalism, Black imagination, if you would, the different way that Black folks have imagined new modes of being and thinking. But how can I be intuitive about what I do and don't pick up in the archive if I have not committed my time and my energy to actually studying that tradition? If I have not committed my time and my energy to actually thinking intentionally about what intuition is and how intuition manifests. And I can do that because I am reaching a certain level of expertise when it comes to telling history, reading history, thinking with history, and thinking with the past. Certainly still a novice, right? But I've got some years under my belt, right? Like I've done a major project, all of these things. And every time I put more and more time into it, the more and more intuition I can have about particular kind of insights. So for example, I was researching the other day and my goal for coming into the archive is like, I don't know exactly what I'm looking for, but I know something is going to come to me of what my next research project article is going to be. Like I said, I finished up that one on the Republic of New Africa and I was like, all right, I'm ready to have my second intellectual project. And I was like, I don't know what exactly it's going to be, but I want to show up to the archive and find it. And to me, it's like, yes, in that moment, and let me tell you, something has come. I'm not going to say what, but it's actually something I had no idea I would actually be interested in writing about. But it came to me, and now all of a sudden I'm like finding it everywhere. I'm letting my intuition go, what have you. Like I'm finding sources. I'm now really narrowly interested in this one topic, what have you. And it's actually, I mean, it's fine to say this, but like it's actually around this idea of self-defense. I did not think that I was going to be writing anything on self-defense. But now I'm really, wow. And isn't that funny, considering the story that I told about the woman on the train? Full circle moment. We'll come back to that. But this idea just came to me as I was in the archive. I'm like, oh my God, this idea of self-defense, I have this whole thesis that I want to write about it. But that came to me intuitively. But that didn't just come out of nowhere. No, it's that I am a subject matter expert on Black nationalism. It's that I routinely study 20th century Black radical thought and the Black radical tradition. So that intuition is heightened because of the expertise that I have. And it made me think about how I think people think frequently they just want their intuition to guide them in areas that they actually have no knowledge in. And what a real kind of flip on your head and way to think about intuition as an extension of the knowledge and skills that you're already building. And I was recently talking to an artist that I am writing about as a part of this intuition chapter. And we were both just talking about intuition as a discipline, right? It is creative insight, but it also comes out of a particular form of discipline. And I just felt like, wow, maybe this management learning approach towards intuition is actually naming something in a way, the way that Louise Little sat her children in a chair and told them that they needed to practice listening to their voice over and over again. And that the more that they practiced, the stronger it would become. And that the stronger it would become, the more information they would hear that would help them and their people, right? So again, she's teaching her children intuition and how you're going to help your people are not just going to come to you. You have to practice it. You have to cultivate it. Intuition has to be an extension of your expertise. It's also something you have to be an expert in, but that's a little bit more technical. That intuition comes out of expertise in the thing that you already are in. And I think that is really fruitful way of thinking. And I also think that it is a way that challenges the popular, I would say, TikTok spirituality, social media spirituality of intuition as something that is just comes to you, or that you have to let your intuition guide you on whether to buy a house or not buy a house, quit your job or move to the next, when you haven't done any research on what is the current state of the job market, what is the housing market like, what are the, balances. And then once you have all of the decision, and then once you have all the knowledge on the different options and the decisions and the kinds of expertise, then you can let your intuition follow. So I just thought that that was a really interesting predicate to our understanding of intuition, and intuition as creative insight, and intuition as new knowledge, not just experience, not just perceptual knowledge, right? But new knowledge. And I thought that was really interesting. Now, but as a scholar of religion, I also have to say that this understanding of intuition in management learning also stops short frequently of how I feel like intuition is talked about for the Black thinkers and artists and what have you that I think about. And that is particular because, let me be very clear, they're talking about intuition as an outcome of expertise, right? Intuition as being strongest in an area where you already know a little something about a little something. But where does then that leave artists, theorists, everyday people? And again, all those people are also everyday people, and everyday people are also thinkers, artists, and theorists. Not to draw a distinction between those two groups, but where does that leave us for thinking about intuition and what is intuitively guiding us, as also extending beyond our own knowledge, our own expertise? The people that I'm interested in think about intuition as inspiration and creative insight from higher powers. But nonetheless, that is still knowledge and inspiration from something outside of the individual, outside of the individual's own kind of capacities, outside of what we would say tacit knowledge, or their knowledge that comes from expertise. So that is a limitation I found, right? When we can only think of intuition as expertise, then it forecloses the possibility of really taking seriously folks who understand their intuition as being guided not just by their own knowledge, but knowledge from ancestors, knowledge from higher powers, knowledge from Allah, knowledge from God, and all of these things. But again, I also found it really interesting in terms of thinking about knowledge as a result of your own expertise and knowledge outside of just decision making, what's the right thing to do, but them, Ackerman and Dorfler, thinking about intuition as a creative kind of insight, a kind of eureka moment. And for me, like I mentioned, that manifested for me personally in this new article idea that I'm pursuing. I had no idea what I was going to write about in the archive, which a lot of people go in with a predetermined topic. They're like, okay, I'm going to do archival research on this particular topic, and they go in with that idea. But for me, I was going in and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to go in with. I know I'm going to study, archives that have to do with 20th century Black nationalism, because that's just my topic. But I'm like, I want something to kind of come to me. And then it did, right? And my intuition guided me to that. It's been guiding me to other sources and thinking about other things. And that is grounded in my own expertise and my own knowledge. And I think that's a really important dimension to add to the way that intuition is talked about. It's not just coming out of nowhere, right? You have to have a kind of expertise, a kind of dedication, and a kind of knowledge base to the thing you're trying to do it around. So that is where I'm going to leave us today on this question of intuition, a sign of expertise. And again, the question is, yes, according to this article, according to my own personal experience, yes, intuition is a sign of expertise. So I'm leaving this feeling really grounded in, there's a real emphasis, and I'm going to relate these 2 points, but there's a real emphasis, I feel like, particularly among young Black women that I've heard frequently growing up as well. And that is be humble. And I think a lot of people, when they talk about humility, they're actually talking about a lot of different things. Everybody who uses the word be humble and humility is actually not talking about the same thing. But I think frequently in general society, there is a real emphasis on telling Black women to be humble. And it made me think about how claiming that my intuition is leading me here, there's a kind of bravado to it in that you are insinuating, if you understand intuition this way, that something higher than you is giving you some knowledge. But there's also a kind of bravado in it if you're taking it in this management learning style by saying, my intuition is leading me to make this decision because I have an expert knowledge in it, because I have expertise in it. And I just love this idea of intuition kind of being a form of knowledge that bucks in the face of humility and having to be humble about the kind of knowledge and the skills that you possess. And intuition as being a particularly kind of gendered form of knowledge. We'll get into that. A particular form of knowledge, not in the Eurocentric knowledge masculine validation process, as Patricia Hill Collins and the likes have called it, but as being a particular kind of, Audre Lorde called it also a distinctly feminine form of knowledge. And thinking about how that distinctly feminine form of knowledge bucks in the face of larger patriarchal discourses and anti-Black misogynoir discourses that frequently tell women that they need to be humble. So that is where I'm finding grounding today in that bit of a full circle moment. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'm super excited because, again, speaking about intuition and expertise, I told you all this idea for Prof in the Park would not leave me alone, and now we have a flyer. It's on my social media. We have a party fully. It's going to be on Thursday, July 30th at 6:30 p.m. in Prospect Park. I'll put the link, actually, for the party full invite in the show notes, but you can also follow me on all socials at IMANABDK on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, where you can also find out more information about the event. So if you are in the New York City area on July 30th, I hope to see you soon. I'm also going to be doing one in Atlanta in August. But until next week, I will see you guys, and I hope you have an absolutely wonderful, grounded time. Bye-bye.